Quite the week of college football, huh? A lot of ranked games, a lot of winners, a lot of losers. Let's get into it. So welcome to my tailgate, Name's Trent. Probably gotten used to it by now. We had a pretty good week of college football, a lot of great games. So again, this is a recap. We're gonna look over our big winners and big losers, who I think have the best shot to win the Heisman after this week, and top 25 comparison, my favorite part. So let's get on to our 5 big winners. And there's a lot of them. Narrowing down to 5 is pretty difficult, but I think I can do it. Starting with our first big winner, we have Penn State, as they had a whiteout versus Iowa, and looks like everyone but Iowa came to play as Penn State won 31-0. Iowa's offense, this is the worst they've probably looked. I think even considering last season, this is probably the worst they looked, period. They only had 76 yards of offense, only 4 first downs. They had as many turnovers as first downs, and that's pretty bad. And that definitely helped Penn State. I didn't watch the game, but I imagine they had good field position on every single drive, which is probably why they scored 31 points. Drew Aller played pretty good. He had 4 touchdowns. It's pretty efficient. The whole offense for Penn State played pretty well. I mean, judging how bad the offense played for Iowa, it made it pretty easy for Penn State. I was wrong. I thought this would be a close game. Not at all. I guess the crowd, the lights and everything was just too big for Iowa to handle. But a very impressive win for Penn State, and they're one of my big winners. The next big winner for me is Utah, as they beat UCLA in a ranked matchup 14-7. The win is really impressive for me, as Utah is continuing to win without Cam Rising. They had Nate Johnson play again, and he played pretty bad. He had a touchdown early in the game, but he also had 3 fumbles, one of them that UCLA was able to recover. But Utah's defense is the big reason they won that game. They had a pick, they had 7 sacks. The defense really came to play, and it definitely helped because UCLA was keeping Utah's offense in check. I know Utah's offense hasn't been looking as good as it has been last year. I mean, I know Cam Rising ain't playing, but UCLA still did a pretty good job. But Utah's defense did a better job. They got that pick 6 on the first play, and Utah got up 14-0 early, and which is how good Utah's defense was playing. UCLA just had no answer. So it was a good win for Utah, but I know with the Pac-12 play getting tougher and tougher, Utah is going to need Cam Rising soon, or else they're going to be in a lot of trouble. The third big winner for me is Alabama, as they beat Ole Miss 24-10. There was a lot of skepticism around Bama, and I had some of it too. I picked Ole Miss to win this game, but man, I was wrong. Ole Miss's defense was looking really good in the first half, but then Bama really picked it up in the second half. The big part was Jason McClellan, as he had 105 yards and a touchdown. The touchdown at the end to seal the deal. Ole Miss their offense just didn't play that good. They had the lead going to the second half. They were up 7-6, but your offense couldn't do much. Judkins only had 13 carries. I don't know if he got injured or not, but I don't think he did. So I don't know why they only gave him 13 carries, especially when he had a pretty good yards per carry average. He had 56 yards. Jackson Dart didn't play that well. Bama's defense, of course, it's still good. That's the big reason that they're still winning games. And Moreau played all right after he was benched last week, so I think he's kind of proven that he's the starting quarterback. But it was a good win for Bama. I didn't expect them to beat Ole Miss by 2 possessions, but they did. It's a good win, so they're one of my big winners. The next big winner for me is Washington State, as they beat Oregon State in a shootout 38-35. I was wrong with this game. Cam Ward really can do it all. He had 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. He balled out. When I was looking at this game, my calls were pretty correct that Oregon State's run game, I thought that would be the reason they would win this game. Their run game played really good. They had 242 rushing yards and I think 3 or 4 touchdowns. But DJ Uiagalelei did not play that great, so that balanced offense was pretty hampered by his poor performance. With that, Cameron Ward took full advantage of it. He balled out, and Washington State got up big, and then Oregon State tried to make a comeback in the fourth quarter, but it was just too little too late, as Oregon State got the very impressive home win, and they do look pretty legit. Again, the big part outside of Cameron Ward was that Washington State had two really big games from their top two receivers. One of them had 170 plus yards, one of them had about 150 yards, and they combined for all four of the touchdowns. Great win for Washington State. They look like a pretty solid team in the Pac-12, but I don't know if they're a true contender yet. The next big winner for me is Oregon, as they embarrassed Colorado 42-6. So yeah, it looks like all the Colorado hype is over. I'm not seeing a lot about them on social media anymore. Colorado just got embarrassed in every aspect. Their offense couldn't get it going. I know they didn't have Travis Hunter, but that probably wouldn't have mattered too much. Bo Nix played really good. He had 3 touchdowns, 270 passing yards, plus whatever he had on the ground. Oregon got up 42-0, and then Colorado had that garbage time touchdown. It didn't really matter. Oregon looks really good. They've looked definitely the second most dominant in the Pac-12 behind Washington, I think. But that game really gave Oregon a real showcase. I mean, they look like a legit Pac-12 contender. I'm excited to see how they play, especially when a lot of these top Pac-12 teams play each other, since they have like 4 teams in the top 10 right now, which is just insane. But it's a very impressive win for Oregon, as they're one of my big winners. There were so many big winners, I have to make an extra spot for one. And I think you know what I have to save it for, as the biggest winner for me is Ohio State, as they beat Notre Dame 17-14. Ohio State's defense played really good. They kept Notre Dame in check. Sam Hartman just played a pretty alright game. Audric Estim also played an alright game. Just Notre Dame's offense couldn't really get anything going the whole game. Ohio State's defense looks really good. When we look at Ohio State's offense, though, they did struggle for a little while, but then of course they had that clutch drive at the end. Kyle McCord converted that 3rd and 19, and then of course their call of the year. We just enough time for one more play, run up the middle, 1-yard touchdown, game, seal, match. I didn't watch much of the game, unfortunately. I was watching the LSU game, but I can just imagine. I mean, hell of a game. Ohio State, they look legit. I think they proved a lot of people wrong with this win. But those wrap up my 5 big winners. Actually, 6. Too many games, man. Too many good games, but I enjoyed it. On with our 5 biggest losers. We're starting off with a pretty interesting one, as Minnesota is our first big loser, as they blew a 21-point lead to lose 37-34 to Northwestern. Looking at this game, because of course I didn't watch it, Northwestern played really good in the second half. Ben Bryant had a really good game. He had 4 touchdowns. The big part was their receiver, Bryce Kritz, who had 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, I didn't watch the game, of course, but Minnesota blew it. I mean, Northwestern is pretty bad this year, and blowing a 21-point lead to them is also really bad. Not much I can really say, but you're one of the big losers. You blew a 21-point lead to a pretty bad team. What else can I say? The next big loser for me is Ole Miss. I brought it up earlier. Bama had a pretty impressive win, as they beat Ole Miss 24-10, and for Ole Miss, it makes it a pretty embarrassing loss. I know the Bama's defense is pretty good. It's probably gonna be the reason that Bama wins 10 or so games this year. But, I mean, Ole Miss, it's pretty disappointing. I said Jackson Dart did not play that good, and then they only had Judkins. He only had 13 carries, so it's pretty bad, especially when you give one of the best running backs in the country only 13 carries in a ranked matchup. Second half adjustment really showed. Bama started to pick it up. They were starting to score some points, and then Ole Miss, they stopped scoring points. I know they only had that touchdown, but I mean, it was just nothing. They had that 1 field goal to make it 17-10, but that was it. Their defense was starting to slow down. I said I didn't watch the game, but I'm guessing they got tired from being on the field so much, which is probably what helped Bama get some points at the end. Really nothing much I can say. Ole Miss just played a pretty bad game, especially because they were a pretty favorable pick from a lot of people to win that game, but pretty disappointing. The next big loser for me is Colorado, as they got blown out by Oregon 42-6. Colorado was already a 21-point underdog going to this game, and I didn't think they would lose by 21. I thought they would lose by maybe 10 or so points. I knew Travis Hunter wasn't playing, but I didn't think that would ultimately seal the deal or make it a blowout. But I don't think it was just him. I don't think he was the reason that Colorado got blown out. Him not playing was not that. Oregon just played everything right. Shedeur Sanders' terrible offensive line really showed. He got sacked 7 times. Oregon also had 7 tackles for loss. It was just really bad. I mean, Oregon's defense isn't even that great to begin with, but Colorado just proved that they still have a lot of holes in their team. So I mean, the run is over for them. It was pretty fun 3 weeks, but it's starting to get pretty rough as they got USC next week, and Travis Hunter is probably not going to play again. So I don't know. I think Colorado will make a bowl game, but it looks pretty rough. Especially when they play some of these better Pac-12 defenses. I feel like their offensive line is really going to struggle in those games. But how they played against Oregon looks pretty bad, and they're one of my big losers because of that. The next big loser for me is Clemson, as they lost to Florida State 31-24 in overtime. Clemson was looking really good throughout this whole game, especially in the first half. They were up 17-7 at one point. But then Florida State got that touchdown late in the first half to make it a closer game. But it looked like Clemson was doing pretty well. Their offense was playing all right. Their defense was keeping Florida State in check. The game really turned, however, when Florida State got that big fumble return touchdown to tie the game up. And, of course, after that, this game's going to be remembered for the 29-yard missed chip shot and that reaction from that Clemson student probably. It's probably what it was. That was hilarious, and it's probably about the accurate reaction to that. That 29-yard miss is pretty bad, especially because if they hit that, Clemson probably gets the win and the upset. I had Clemson ranked going into this game, and now I don't have them ranked. They're 2-2. It's pretty rough. We'll see what they do, and once they get some of the easier ACC games. Maybe Duke and Florida State are just that good, but it's pretty bad, and especially just with that 29-yard missed field goal. The last big loser for me is Notre Dame, specifically Notre Dame's defense in the last 30 seconds of this game. I thought Notre Dame had it. Their defense had been playing good all game. Ohio State hadn't scored since they were up 10-0 early in the third quarter. So it looked like Notre Dame had it. I didn't expect Ohio State to drive down the field and get one more touchdown, but I was wrong. Again, Notre Dame's defense really choked in the last few seconds, especially the last few plays. They allowed that 3rd-and-19 conversion on a 22-yard pass right down the middle. It was a great catch, but still, I mean, you can't allow those kind of plays, especially when you're a top 10 team. And then, of course, the big one, Notre Dame only had 10 people on the field for the last play of the game. And with that, it made it pretty easy for Ohio State's running back, Chip Triam, to get into the end zone. I mean, he ran right to the empty area. I mean, where there was that 11 man wasn't there, so it made it pretty easy. And it's just that. I mean, those 2 big mistakes make him the big loser, because in a top 10 matchup at home, you're up 1 play to decide it, and you mess up like that, not having an extra man on the field. It's pretty bad, and that's why I have Notre Dame as my big loser. But overall, that wraps up my 5 big losers. Now, who are my top Heisman candidates after this week? There's definitely a few, and a lot of them are from the Pac-12. It is just loaded in that conference. To name a few, I would say that Cameron Ward has been jumping up there. He's been playing really good, especially with that big win against Oregon State. I think he's definitely in the Heisman talks now. Jane Daniels, again, had a great game. He had 4 touchdowns against Arkansas. Big rivalry win, so I think he's up there. Of course, you have a lot of people that are just kind of staying there. They have no reason to drop out, and those few are Bo Nix, Quinn Ewers, Jordan Travis, Caleb Williams, and I think at the top it's still Michael Penix. He's been playing great still. He played really good against California. Expected him to. And I'm really excited for when they get into some of those ranked Pac-12 games to see just how good he really is. But he's probably still going to play really good. But I'm just excited to see just how much better or worse he plays. But those are my main Heisman candidates. As we get on to my favorite section, the top 25 comparisons. Looking at the polls, this week I think they are pretty good. However, of course, there's going to be some differences with my polls and the AP. The first major one is that I have Ohio State ranked number 2. Now the reason for that is that if you see my polls, I've kept Ohio State number 3 the whole time. I didn't think there was a reason to drop them out of the top 4. I thought they'd been playing pretty solid outside of that first game against Indiana, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr. back. So I really had no reason to drop them. I thought Michigan was playing about on the same level, and I never dropped them. With that win, however, I put them up at number 2 as they got their big win, and their defense looked really good. Their offense, of course, had some troubles, but it was still a top 10 win. And so right now I think they look like the second best team. And then I have Florida State at 3, while the polls have them at 5. Probably the big difference between that is I had Clemson ranked, so Florida State versus Clemson was a ranked game. And so with Florida State winning a ranked game, in my opinion, I jumped up to 3. And with that, I had Michigan dropping down to the 4, as I think of anyone in the top 4, they've looked the worst. However, their talent and just the team in general, they're still a top 4 team. And then at the bottom, didn't change much. I still have Texas and USC at 5 and 6. They had their wins. I know USC struggled a bit, but I still think they're a top 6 team. And Texas, of course, blew out Baylor, so there was no reason to change them. Rounding out my top 10, it's not too much different. It's mainly just a Pac-12 fest down there, except for Penn State. I have them at 7, as the polls have them at 6. Penn State, again, they did have a really good win. I mean, of course, they shut out Iowa. They beat them 31-0, so it's still impressive. But I do think USC is a better team. That's just me right now. Later down the season, as they get into conference play, we'll see. But as of right now, that's why Penn State ranked 7th. I think they're slightly worse than USC. And then rounding out my top 10, I have Washington at the 8, Oregon at the 9, and Utah at the 10. Washington hasn't had their big win yet. I know they've been looking incredible, so that's why they're in my top 10. But they haven't shown me enough to say that they should be jumping any team. I know the polls have jumped them up to 7. To 7 with USC dropping really far, but I didn't drop USC. And I don't think Washington has proven that they're better than Penn State just yet. The quarterback is better, of course, but that's really all they have to shown. So I have them at 8. In my polls last week, I had Utah ranked ahead of Oregon, but after this week, Oregon just destroyed Colorado. So I think Oregon proved to me that they are better than Utah as of right now. And then Utah is, of course, at 10 because they beat UCLA. They beat a ranked team, so they're still in my top 10. But I did drop them down because I do think Oregon is better right now. 11 through 15 has a lot of the same teams. There's a few differences, but it's mainly just the rankings. I have Alabama ranked ahead of LSU, and I have Bama right outside the top 10 at 11, and then right under them is LSU at 12. These teams seem really neck and neck. While I do think that LSU does have a better roster, Bama just has more impressive wins, and their loss isn't as bad. They lost to Texas by 10. LSU lost to Florida State by 21, so it's a pretty big difference there. So that's why I have Bama ranked at 11th ahead of LSU. At 13th, I have Duke. I think Duke is way better than the polls are giving them credit for. The polls have them at 16. I have them at 13. The win against Clemson was super impressive, and then Duke has really showed no signs of inconsistency. I know the schedule's been pretty easy since Clemson, but they've just been blowing out everybody. Riley Leonard's been playing good. Their defense has been solid. They do play Notre Dame, so that's a real test for them. But right now, I think I think Duke is the second best team in the ACC behind Florida State. And speaking of Notre Dame, I have Notre Dame ranked 14th as I had them out my top 10, of course. They lost to Ohio State. They shouldn't be in my top 10. I dropped them down a little farther than the polls did. The polls had them at 11. I have them at 14. That's because I just think that loss was pretty bad. I mean, of course, the choking at the end, like I brought up earlier, allowing a 3rd and 19 and then not having 11 guys on the field for the final play. Their offense didn't play as good as I thought they were, so I dropped them down pretty low. But they're still in my top 15, so I don't think it's that bad. And then right at 15, I have USC, which is the same as the polls. They've looked pretty good. They're undefeated. They're 4-0, so no reason to really drop them. I think 15 is a pretty good spot for them. I think right in the middle of the polls. After the top 15, typically the polls get pretty messy. And when we look at 16 through 20, you can see a lot of that. I have Washington State ranked 16th, which is similar to the polls. I did have Washington State ranked a little bit lower than the polls did last week, but I think the win against Oregon State was really impressive considering that they were up 21 at one point. And the game was basically over. Oregon State tried to come back, but they had no shot. So I think their win was really impressive. So I think me and the polls are equal on that at 16. I do have Missouri ranked really high though. I give them a lot of credit for beating K-State, especially with that 61-yard field goal. And I know they played Memphis close, but I think Memphis is a pretty good team. So I didn't see much reason to drop them, especially with how much craziness was at the bottom 10 of the polls. I really couldn't drop them, so I brought them up one spot, honestly. So I really couldn't do much. The polls finally put them in the rankings at 23, which I don't agree with. I think Missouri is pretty good, but we'll just see. They do play LSU in 2 weeks, so that's a pretty good test for them. Similar with Florida, I have Florida ranked 18th. The polls have them ranked a little lower at 22. Again, I give Florida a lot of credit for beating Tennessee. It was a super impressive win in my opinion, just shutting down that offense and everything. I know they struggle with Charlotte also, similar to Missouri. They both struggle with group of 5 teams, but with how much craziness happened at the bottom of the polls, I really couldn't drop Florida at all. So I have them ranked 18th. I have Tennessee 19th, which is a little bit higher than the polls. But I mean, like I said, there's a lot of differences at the bottom of the polls. I had them ranked 22nd in my last polls, and now I'm ranked 19th here because, I mean, they obliterated UTSA. Nothing much I could really say about that. And around out this little 16 through 20 spot, I have TCU at 20. After that loss to Colorado, they keep on winning, and I think they should still be in the rankings, in my opinion. And they're on a 3-game win streak after losing to Colorado, like I said, so I really have no reason to drop them. So they're in my top 20. Rounding out my polls at the bottom 5, I finally have Miami ranked. A lot of teams at the bottom of the polls lost. So Miami won. Tyler Van Dyke is looking really good. Miami looks to be really improved from last season. So I put them in my rankings. I think they are looking really good now. I dropped Oregon State a little bit lower than the polls did. The polls have them at 19th still. I dropped them to 22 just because that was a really bad loss. Their defense really did not come to show. I guess those losses at the end of the offseason really showed in this game against a pretty good Pac-12 offense. So I think it was a really bad loss. So I still have them ranked, but I have them ranked a little bit lower than the polls do. Finally have Oklahoma ranked. Oklahoma is ranked 14th in the AP poll. I have them ranked 23rd. Again, I just wasn't really set on them. It's so weird. Dylan Gabriel is playing really good, and it's nice to see Oklahoma improving a good bit, especially with how they were last year. But again, they haven't had a very impressive resume. I didn't have them ranked to start with, so that's really the big difference why I finally have Oklahoma ranked compared to them being 14th in the polls. It was just completely different starts. Maryland is in my rankings. At 24th, they have Kansas. I was thinking about putting Kansas in, but I think Maryland has played better so far. Tulia Tagovailoa has been playing really good for Maryland. Their offense is playing pretty good like I expected. They're playing about how I expected to so far. With the start of the schedule being so easy, it makes sense that they're 4-0. So it's really good to see that, and that's why I have them in my rankings. And to round out my rankings, I have Ole Miss at 25. I had them ranked a lot lower than the polls did last week. I had them ranked 21st compared to the polls. Had them at 15th going to that Bama game. And I don't think Fresno State is a ranked team. Fresno State's had a really weird schedule and just a really weird season so far. They have 2 Power 5 wins, which are really impressive. They beat Purdue and they beat Arizona State. Then they almost lost to an FCS school in Eastern Washington. So I don't really see a reason to rank Fresno yet. Maybe 1 or 2 more wins and I'll definitely consider ranking them. But right now, I think a 3-1 Ole Miss team is better. So I have Ole Miss rounding out my rankings at 25. And that wraps up the poll comparison. Again, if you want to read more into it, you can pause and look at their comparisons. But that wraps up the week 4 recap. Sorry, I couldn't think for a second. So yeah, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed the recap. I definitely did. It's always fun to do these kind of videos. I like talking about college football. We have a pretty good week for college football next week. I'm excited for that Duke Notre Dame game. So I'll be back with the predictions on Wednesday. And as always, like, favorite, and subscribe if you had. And I'll be back for another prediction video. Also, you see the little cat. You probably can't see much of it, but yeah, there's the big old fur ball. Look at that. Isn't he adorable?